Hi, I'm Kim Schulz with Century 21, and I am joined here today with
Andrea Gathwright with Century 21 Tricities and Thomas with Mid-Columbia Home Evaluation Services.
Okay.
Thank you, Thomas, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we'll just start off with some fun questions. How long have you been appraisal or an appraiser?
Well, more than 20 years now. I mean, it's been a while. So
Okay.
It kind of started up in Spokane and then came back to the Tri-Cities where I grew up. So.
Do you love it?
Well, considering I used to cook hamburgers for a living, yeah, it's a huge improvement.
From restaurants to appraiser.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a change. Well, my wife was in the lending industry, and her biggest gripe was always trying to find an appraiser who could be reliable. And so she just gave me the list of their approved appraisers, and I called every one of them on the list and finally found somebody to give me an apprenticeship. So.
Oh, nice. So I know that there's a lot of confusion on the seller or the buyer's part of how an appraiser is actually chosen. They have the idea that you can just be like, I want this person. Can you?
Yeah, it used to be a little more direct where lenders could choose their appraisers directly, but now there's an AMC, and each AMC has its own rotation, and each lender has its group of approved appraisers and preferred appraisers, and then appraisers they'll tolerate if you can't get anybody else.
They'll tolerate.
Well, I say that because maybe their turn time isn't very good, or maybe their skill set isn't what they're looking for. They've had some inconsistency in the past. So they have sort of like the A team, and then there's sort of the B team just in case, everybody gets backed up, with volume and whatnot. So by and large, then what happens is that when the lender orders the appraisal, it goes to the AMC, which is the blind middleman, and they hand out the appraisal based on the rotation of who's up next and who can deliver this the quickest.
Okay.
So
perfect.
So being able to meet those time frames within the closing date of the contract.
Yeah, it's usually that. There's some AMCs that base it on their profit and loss, so it depends on your fee, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But I don't generally work with those AMCs.
Okay.
So I'm not one to take the low bid.
Right. So I know for us, the past, I'd say year and a half, 2 years, the real estate market's been kind of crazy. What have you seen on your side?
Crazy is probably an understatement. We look at it from a real economic supply and demand situation. So when you see the demand increase through increased buying power with low interest rates and better paying jobs, that kind of thing, suddenly you have all these buyers and then a limited supply. And as we don't develop land as quickly, or the price of new construction comes up, that kind of thing, then suddenly you've got multiple buyers for every single listing of an existing home. So once that competition starts, then of course the prices were always going to come up. And as the price of goods and the balance is once the price of construction levels out, then the price of a resale will level out in conjunction, because new construction becomes a better option. Right now the competition is it's a little expensive to buy new, but it's not out of reach.
Right.
Sure.
But because the option of standing homes is so limited, people are paying that extra premium for new construction, and now they're paying more for existing housing too.
Which then affects future listings and sales, correct?
Yep, and until we get into a situation where buying power changes or supply and demand changes at some level, then we'll have that continued increasing market.
Okay.
We've been really seeing the increase for almost 5 years. It used to be in the Tri-Cities 1 to 3% every year like clockwork.
And now we're in doubles.
And then probably 5 years ago it jumped up to about 8%, and then we've seen double digits over the last 4 or 5 years, and really a steep increase over the last 6 months.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how that continues, because at some point, 1,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home is unattainable at a certain price point for the particular buyer in question if buying power changes.
So I guess that brings me into another question. So I know that I have some clients, I'm sure Kim does too, who think that we're going to be hitting like a downward spiral, I guess you could say. From where you're at, what do you see?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball.
That's what I tell them. My
and
crystal
that's
ball.
that's the struggle.
Cracked.
Yeah,
right?
it's in the shop, and the repairman has quit. So
the struggle is, like I said, buying power. And buying power is determined by the interest rate and good paying jobs and those types of things. So as long as the continued forecast is good, solid paying jobs, low interest rates, and at worst, a balance of supply and demand, you'll see continued increase in pricing. At the point in which that calculation changes, should interest rates, and I don't mean like, a quarter point here or there. I mean, that's
significantly.
That's an overreaction. I'm talking about like once we cross like 5% in interest rates for a loan, 6%, that area, which is still remarkably low.
It is.
People forget that. But once you cross into that, your buying power changes, and suddenly two people with a minimum wage job can't afford a house anymore, and then they become renters. So at the point in which you cross that threshold, then you'll start to see it back down a little bit. But again, it has to change dramatically for the bottom to fall out of it. And the only other factor in that is consumer confidence, which again goes into buying power.
Sure.
Now, I know I came from California, so my perspective is a little bit different. We're pretty self-contained here in the Tri-Cities. Would you agree with that?
It's a little insulated, but really, if you look at, you have to look at the economics and what drives people here and what brings people here regarding as far as like major employers, agriculture being number one, the Hanford related stuff kind of being the close second. That's an interesting dynamic for that, but I don't think there's a lot of people looking at the map going, hey, look, there's let's go to Richland.
It's more
it's necessity.
Job driven.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely job driven, and with it being that limited, but we're also not limited by land either. We can build as much in any direction as we want. It's just a matter of absorbing that land and converting it.
Right.
But yes, it is a little insulated, and really I've worked in every county in eastern Washington. When you get right down to it, cities are kind of isolated anyway. But there is a level of, a 2x4 costs the same here as it does in Spokane. So there's going to be some commonality.
Right.